is Senior Economic Advisor, African Economic Development Policy Initiative. Ma'am, you are welcome to this conversation.
Thank you very much.
Good. My pleasure to have you. We also have Chief Osita Chidoka, former Minister of Aviation in Nigeria, former Corps Marshal of the Federal Road Safety Corps in Nigeria. He's also a politician. You're welcome to the conversation. I think he's going to be joining us shortly. And then we also have Mr. Tonye Cole, co-founder and former group executive director of Sahara Group. You're welcome to the conversation. Mr. Tonye, you're welcome. All right. So let's get on with the topic. But in the interest of those who may not know, or those who are hearing about late Chief Michael Obara for the first time, at the age of 39, he was the youngest premier in Nigeria, where he administered the Oby Eastern region. And in less than 5 years of his tenure, the Oby Eastern region was adjudged one of the fastest growing economies in the world, alongside countries like Malaysia and Singapore. So we want to look at his style of leadership, which is merit-based approach, one of the legacies that he is today remembered for. Some of you are joining us on YouTube, watching via the channel of Center for Memories. Some are watching on Facebook. You are going to get opportunity to ask your questions to the panelists. But at this particular time, I would urge you to allow us some little time to kick off this conversation. And I'm going to start with you, Dr. Oby Ezekwesili. You've tested leadership at different levels, locally and internationally. And I want to ask you, what is your most memorable developmental legacy of late Chief M.I. Obara?
Let me thank you first for laying on this event to discuss the legacy of Dr. Michael Obara. I think the work that the Center for Memory is doing is fantastic work of ensuring documentation of the history, especially of the Southeast, and the key players that we have had over the decades. That being said, to the specific agenda that we're discussing today, one of the things that I found fascinating about Dr. Obara, even ahead of his legacy on development, is the person of Dr. Obara. You know, reading about him and seeing how, as a medical doctor, he suddenly had this sense that he was not just supposed to be a professional, a technocrat in that sense of definition, but that he as a citizen needed to express his voice. And seeing how it was that he stood out with protesters who were protesting injustice. And in the process of doing that, he ended up having to go to jail. Interestingly, it was that particular incident, occurrence in his life that ended up making him a well-known figure who then became part of the Zikist movement. And from being part of the Zikist movement, went into politics full scale and won the office and won the election to be a lawmaker in the Eastern region. And from there, he basically distinguished himself as a leader. So this is a man who, unlike most of us, you know, that are professionals in our country and continent, feel like politics we have no business to do with politics, or are disdainful of people who actually use their voice. when people use their voice and demand for justice for other people, when people use their voice and demand accountability on the part of those that govern, the rest of us just look at them with so much disrespect, as if it is something that a respectful a professional should not be doing. Not with Dr. Okpara. That for me is such a distinguishing factor in the person of Dr. Okpara, and I really cherish that. So now to the matter of his developmental legacy. I mean, this is a man who, when he talks about I think he calls it pragmatic socialism or something like that, around his agrarian revolution. He was able to inspire people to see agriculture as a pathway toward industrialization. And what he did meant that many communities were actually giving up their land voluntarily. That's what it means to be a leader. The fact that he could inspire people to voluntarily buy into an idea that he espoused is so phenomenal. Now imagine that the gains that the Southeast, the Eastern region, because it's much more than the Southeast now. It was the entire Southeast and the current South-South that made up the Eastern region. Now imagine that the strides that they had in agriculture really continued toward industrialization. Then it would have provided a pathway toward what we call economic transformation of that sub-region. And then, with the added emphasis that he had as a medical doctor on the issue of health and education, the two would have resulted in the development of a very strong human capital base that then begins to innovate, that begins to engage in really productive, value-added activities that would mean, even higher leaps and bounds of growth. So I find his legacy quite fascinating. And I love the fact that this is a man who was so self-assured. I loved his confidence. I mean, you could see him. You looked at him and you could see this man was very self-assured. He wasn't arrogant, but he was self-assured.
Yeah. And do you say that those contributed to part of why he was just successful? Those personal traits that you mentioned.
I would say that it does matter to be someone who has that courage of conviction. You believe a thing and you go for it. When you see his speeches, when you see his engagement with his leaders, his fellow leaders, as in his peers, and his engagement with the citizens, I just love that part of him where he would say something like, I am your servant, and no servant is greater than the master. So he was basically saying to the people that I am here only because of you. And that is a point that a lot of people don't realize in democracy. In our democracy today, the governors in each of those states in the Southeast think that, they are over and above the people that well, maybe some of them were not actually voted into office. So
okay, we are going to come to that.
We're
going to come to that soon.
Yes. So, but to your question, I love that trait of Chief Michael Okpara, where he is this confident man, but who understood the power of the citizens to give legitimacy to him as a leader.
Thank you very much, Dr. Oby Ezekwesili. We are, in case you just joined us, we are still talking on the legacies of late Chief Dr. Mike Okpara, the former premier of the Old Eastern region. And you have just been listening to Dr. Oby Ezekwesili here, giving some of memorable leadership qualities of the former premier. So, okay, I just want to welcome Chief Osita Chidoka. I introduced you earlier. Thank you for joining this conversation. If you can hear me.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm here.
Good. All right. And I'm going to come back to you immediately. We've been talking about late Chief M.I. Okpara leadership style of meritocracy. merit-based approach. And we are still on the platform of Center for Memories. Center for Memories is known for their promotion, protection, and preservation of the heritage of the Ndi Igbo and Nigeria and Africa at large. So I'm coming to you, Chief Osita Chidoka. What basic beliefs and philosophies would you say distinguish Chief M.I. Okpara's leadership style from amongst his peers, the ones that you can remember?
Well, thank you very much. I've watched the M.I. Okpara video. I participated in the interviews leading to the video. So Chief M.I. Okpara is definitely a leader that we need to understudy and understand in today's world, particularly in the context of what I call the leadership failure that has happened in Nigeria. To understand M.I. Okpara, you must pay compliment to the bureaucracy that he inherited. I made that point in the video, that the bureaucracy he inherited was a merit-driven bureaucracy. And it is important in Nigeria that while history is the story of the leader, is the story of the strong man, we also must pay due attention to the enabling environment that made the strong man to succeed. So if you look at the public service that made him succeed, if you look at the story of Jerome Udoji, who wrote the story Under Three Masters, and which he recounted his time with M.I. Okpara, you will see the kind of bureaucracy that he inherited. That bureaucracy was able to do the Eastern Development Plan. That bureaucracy was able to implement the ambitious programs he had in agriculture, he had in education, and he had in industrialization. So if you look at the idea of what you call now Nobudu Cattle Ranch as the center for the dairy industry in the Southeast. If you look at Emene, that he figured as the automobile corridor, the industry for technology, heavy industries. If you look at the palm plantations that he has, and don't forget that the Southeastern economy, then the Eastern economy ran on palm. What is interesting about M.I. Okpara was that the Eastern regional economy was the economy with the least income amongst the three regions of Nigeria. It was the oil inflows of 1965 that began to change the story of the Eastern economy. From 1959, when he became the leader of government business, to 1965, the Eastern economy was received the least revenue from the federal government because of the derivation principle that ensured monies went to the regions where they came from. So despite receiving the least amount of money, he was still able to match the growth of the Western economy under the management of Chief Awolowo. The Western economy was powering through from the cocoa industry. The Northern economy was strong from granules and agricultural produce, but particularly granules. In fact, like I said in another forum, the whole idea of trucking business being a Northern business, having Northerners in trucking, was because the Nigerian Railway went on strike, and the regional government of the North thought that that was a ploy to deny them of bringing their produce to the port. So they went into buying trucks and giving to Northern businessmen to bring the granules to the seaports. That's how the Northerners had an advantage in the trucking business that they have till today in Nigeria. So M.I. Okpara created the advantage that the Eastern economy had by enabling education, enabling diffuse development using the Ogoja province, the Calabar province, the Port Harcourt province, and then the what is today the Anambra and the Enugu axis of the Eastern regional economy. So while we talk about the merit of his government, the first thing I always want to lay out was that his government inherited that bureaucracy that was manned largely by the colonial government. But his government sustained it, maintained that bureaucracy, and continued his ambitious growth plans using that bureaucracy. So if today we want to build, go in the line of M.I. Okpara, one of the things we must do is to go back and rebuild our bureaucracy. to go back and rebuild our public service in most of the southeastern states. Our public service are comatose and dead. We need to bring them back to life.
Thank you very much, Chief Osita Chidoka. We are going to come to that about the learnings that we should make as a country and as a region from the leadership style of late Dr. M.I. Okpara. Mr. Tonye Cole, I'll come to you right now. I don't know if you can hear me. Hello, Mr. Tonye. Okay. Let me come back to you, Dr. Oby Ezekwesili. Now, looking at the different levels of government in Nigeria and what you have said initially, let's look at the different levels of government in Nigeria, local, states, and the federal levels. How would you compare the type of merit-based leadership style of Dr. M.I. Okpara and what we currently practice today?
I don't think there's any basis for comparison, frankly, because you see, in the regionalism that was practiced at the time that Dr. Michael Okpara was the premier of our own region, it was very clear that the incentive went toward playing with your best. So the Southeast region, for example, was putting its best feet forward in every sense of the word. It needed to develop, it needed to grow, it needed to build as much human capabilities as possible. And so it invested in the right priorities. Now, with the advent of the military incursion into governance, that all changed because we became a centralized country with a system of governance that really overwhelmed or overran the local and also the state. And so the fact that we now became a centralized system of government that was more driven by who had control over rent that was coming from oil meant that it disincentivized any need for people to do the kind of things that Premier Okpara did in the Southeast. He was doing what he was doing because the structure of governance was enabling of such independence of thought. And he could make those decisions without having to take any form of directive from anyone at the center. All the aspects of the responsibilities that he took care of in the region were things that he had control over, and he could make decisions about them. He could assemble his own team and work with a very good team to produce the right kind of result for the region. Now, if you compared it with what happened with military rule would send a military governor to any of the states. You had no voice in who they sent to you. The military governor comes to the state. He wants to appoint the kind of people that he thinks are going to be loyal to him. He compromises quality, he compromises competence, he compromises even character in that process. And then after the military, the basic structure of the Constitution following 1979 constitutional process kept us still with a centralized system. And the more we kept being centralized in approach, the more we alienated the local as well as the state level participation of the kind that you saw Michael Okpara, Dr. Michael Okpara operate in the Southeast. So we have to be conscious of how the structure permitted a certain kind of way of being a leader in the Southeast during the time of Okpara, and then how it perverted that kind of way subsequently following the misadventure of military in the governance process.
Okay, Doctor, just briefly, you've talked about, Chief Chidoka talked about the bureaucracy that late M.I. Obara inherited, and we are talking about the structure of government now. Would you say that the structure currently in place is a barrier or is a challenge that current leaders have in order to make the kind of giant strides that late M.I. Obara made?
Of course, that's exactly what I'm saying. I mean, the fiscal decentralization, the fact that we actually were in many ways faithful to the practice of federalism during the time of Michael Okpara, compared to what subsequently happened, is a part of the problem. But then the second part of the problem is just the general quality of political leadership that we subsequently, produced following the First Republic. The subsequent, if you evaluated the character, the competence, the quality of political leadership that we produced after that, after their own class of politicians were in place, and especially in our sub-region, you would understand why there's such incredible disparity between what they were able to accomplish and what is today accomplished in the 6 states of the Southeast, more specifically.
Thank you very much, Doctor. And Chief Osita Chidoka, still on this structure and bureaucracy in government, would you say that the hands of the leaders are tied? There's nothing they could do? Because you mentioned earlier that they were able to, later M.I. Obara was able to change the system that he met on ground, putting the right things in place. Looking at the state level, before you even come to the national level, would you say that the hands of the leaders are tied? There's nothing they could change to be able to make these kind of giant strides?
So the hands of the leaders are not tied in any way. They are not tied in any form. What we have is what I called work avoidance. There's a general work avoidance principle in the country. Nobody wants to do work. And that is because in what I call the moral infrastructure of the country, the get-rich-quick syndrome, the quick access to everything, parents who buy exams for their children, parents who buy spaces for federal government colleges, everybody will lobby for everything. So there is a general decay in our moral infrastructure, which is very important in building up any system. But the work avoidance is such that nothing in the 1999 Constitution stops a governor from behaving like M.I. Okpara behaved. So one of the greatest fallacy in Nigeria, one of the greatest 419 in my view, is the fact that people in government are sitting down there, taking the resources that are coming to them today, pocketing it and distributing it to themselves and their families, and telling us that, yes, until we rebuild Nigeria, until we restructure Nigeria, that's when we will be able to get it to work. So, but I don't know which part of the Constitution allows for what they're doing now. I just saw on WhatsApp, I don't know if it is true, that the federal government credited the accounts of local governments directly today or yesterday for the very first time. All the local government resources went straight to local government accounts because governors used to hijack it and use it as they liked. If it is true, it solves a problem, but it still doesn't solve a problem because you see, the idea of federalism is 2 federating units, the federal and the center and the state. I have never seen a federalism with 3 federating units. So it is the responsibility of the state to figure out how they want to organize their local governance. And it is their responsibility to figure out how the funding structure should be, not that of the federal government. The federal government is doing this feeding bottle federalism, where they are determining for the states how they will exist. But that you can attribute to the 99 Constitution, but I don't think it's a deal breaker. What is the deal breaker today is that our governors are weary of work. Let me add an anecdote here. Many people do not know that Zik and Okpara quarreled for most of the time Okpara was premier. They had serious quarrels. In fact, so many people didn't want Michael Okpara to be prime minister, to be premier, because they said he wanted to overturn Zik, that he wanted to take over from Zik and render Zik ineffective, because Zik became Governor General in 1963. So there were constant tension in the Eastern region between the so-called Okpara supporters and the Zik supporters. But Michael Okpara handled it very graciously. He remained committed to the ideals of Zik. He remained committed to the ideals of the NCNC, that when the eventual conference on to remove him was eventually made, most of the people in that meeting decided not to vote for Michael Okpara to be removed. As at 1965, people do not remember that Michael Okpara had boycotted the federal elections of 1964. That election was boycotted in the Southeast. And he threatened that he will secede from Nigeria if we do not redo the 1963 constitution. So part of the agreement to conduct the election in 1965 was that Prime Minister Tafawa Balewa agreed that there will be a constitutional review to review the 1963 constitution. That was why the elections of 65 was now done in the East in March 1965. By that time, Tafawa Balewa had become Prime Minister, invited by Zik to form government. So there were tensions, there were issues in the 1963-64 period. But what was great about it was that those issues were being resolved democratically. The military intervention and the subsequent efforts of the military compounded our national growth trajectory. But I just wanted to point out that all that is happening today, that you can find parallels in 1962-63.
Yes.
The Western regional crisis, nothing that is happening today, but what is happening today is that the quality of manpower, the ability to deliver public goods have greatly reduced.
Yes. Thank you very much, Chief Osita Chijoka. And if you are just joining us, we are still on the webinar, July edition of the webinar for Center for Memories, where we are talking about the OKWESILI Eze. That is a round peg in a round hole, or square peg in a square hole. The leadership style of late Dr. M.I. Okpara, who was the former premier of the old Eastern region. Just to remind those who are watching us on Facebook and on YouTube that shortly after this conversation, precisely in the next 30 minutes, the documentary titled M.I. Power, the legacies of M.I. Okpara will be screened online. So you have opportunity of watching it from any part of the world where you are. So just stay tuned after this conversation. However, at this point also, I would like to call on those who are joining us on this conversation. If you have questions, if you have contributions, this is the time to just take out a minute to ask questions to the panelists. And let me also thank you, the panelists, Chief Osita Chijoka, Dr. Oby Ezekwesili, and Mr. Tonye Cole, for giving us a whole lot of insights into the leadership style of Dr. M.I. Okpara. So as I wait for questions from those who are joining us, let me ask, at age 39, M.I. Okpara had basically made imprints in the leadership of this country, 39. And I still see young people today at 39 still trying to find their feet in Nigeria's leadership, both at the state level and national level. I want to ask, is it that the young people are not capable, or that the system is not yet ready for them? Dr. Oby Ezekwesili, if you are here with me, please, would you start to attempt that question?
I think that we, as a country, collectively have suffered from the absence of growth in many ways. What we've seen has been a regression in the quality of our processes, of our politics, of our economy, of our basic social interaction. And in the process of all of these regression, we have compromised the kind of system that allows for better ideas to prevail. And so we became a country where actually might is right. So a lot of people don't have the time for might is right, and therefore they naturally select themselves out of the kinds of systems that produced a Michael Okpara easily in the past. So, for example, if you look at our politics, it's a race to the bottom. How many of the people that got the same kind of education that a Dr. Michael Okpara got when he did, are willing to take a bet on Nigeria's politics? As a matter of fact, it is said that non-denkleka name politics in Nigeria. So that basic notion that onye nwere ọgụgụ isi ama nje na-akpa ali bulu akpasi na ebu politician, that really became a way of simply opting out and electing yourself out of that political process. So even if you were in 39 and you could very well do politics well, you could see that the conditions within which you were going to do politics were not going to be favorable to you, except Mibo of Ogil. You would not, you would not really be acceptable within the network of the kind of politics aneme. So the sensible ones basically say to themselves, "Mamme politics." So when you look at the kind of thing that it has bred, it has entrenched a certain mindset and a certain kind of political culture that people beat their heads against the wall to try to penetrate. And so if you asked me, I would say that until we had a conversation around the reform of the political culture and its citizens that would make that happen, I think the younger ones, Osita would probably speak to this better because he's been one of those within PDP. I was in a PDP government, but I did a sort of aweme politics for, but Osita so aweme, so he can speak to the politics the political arena better than I can. But the truth is, the smarter you are, the more impossible it gets for you to actually be a Michael Okpara at the age of 39 in today's within today's political context. Except, of course, me did ready EJ roll on the floor for the so-called leaders of the party, which Michael Okpara would not have done in his time. So some of the young ones may emerge, Kita, are not emerging in the way that a Michael Okpara emerged. He emerged in his own right as one who had something to offer the society. The politics today is perverted, the incentives are wrongly aligned, and so getting people who are sensible like him into our politics is quite a job.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Oby Ezekwesili. That's really, really interesting angle there. Well, I'm going to come to you, Osita Chidoka. Let me get on to Mr. Tonye Cole. He just joined us. Mr. Tonye Cole, you're an entrepreneur, and you have also tasted leadership at different levels. When we talk about the merit-based leadership, what, in your opinion, do you think is the greatest reason why a leader should think about merit, the merit approach for any kind of leadership? And what are the kind of results you are likely to get, using Amy Obara as an example?
Okay, so first and foremost, can you hear me loud and clear?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, excellent. So my apologies first. As you can see, I'm out. Today is election at in APC election in River State. And so MI Opera essentially is doing what I did, and it's his steps that we are following. One of the greatest problems that we have found out, just as Auntie Oby said, is that there has just been this downward spiral as far as leadership is concerned in Nigeria. And so, like my big brother Osita has led the way, so have we, which basically means that we have to get into the political arena, which is what MI Opara did. One of the things that I loved about his leadership style was the fact that he was a visionary. This is a man that looked out for the people. He set out exactly what he wanted to do. He went out to do it. And everything that you look about, I'm from Rivers State. He touched Rivers State in a way that nobody else that I know of has touched. From the video that you watched, you saw how he was responsible for ensuring that even as far as our refineries, was not taking 100% away, but that Nigeria invested in the refineries. We saw also there's a place called Transamadi. I grew up in Port Harcourt hearing about Transamadi industrial layout and all the evidence of great companies that were in Transamadi, from Michelin and all, to find out that he was the one that had that vision that established Transamadi industrial layout and brought in Michelin and great companies into Transamadi. My wife, part of my wife's heritage is from Cross Rivers. To get into Cross Rivers and find out that Ubudukatu Ranch, that just blew me away. There was a man that sat down and did not look at the fact that I am Igbo, but looked at the entire region and decided that he needed to change the landscape. This is something that we're missing today. So today in politics, what you find is that we're very, very, very tribal. Everything is about where I come from, it's about my people and all of that. And this legacy that MI Opera broke and scattered is something that we must ensure that we will do. Let me answer one other question that you brought up about the youth in politics. I love the fact that we're standing in a place where we must ensure that the youth must come in. But for us to do that, they have to see examples that they can believe in. I've been walking around the streets of Abonima today, going from ward to ward, ensuring that the World Congress would happen. But why am I don't have to be here at the ward level going out. But I wanted to showcase to everybody who is an aspiring politician that the only way you can do this is come down, come to the ward and ensure that you are a part and parcel of it. Because people don't believe that you can get the right type of politics today because of what we are seeing. However, I am assuring you that if we do not have this fight, we are in the fight and we're going to stay in the fight and we're going to encourage people, just as MI Opera encourage the whole generation of people to come into politics. We are going to make sure that we're doing the same. So that's really where I am. And thank you, sister. Thank you, Auntie Oby, for your contributions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tonye Cole. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for making our time to join us. All right, so we have a couple of people raising up their hands and then some also dropping questions on the chat box. Let's take one person who's raised up his hand to ask his question.
Can you hear me?
Oby, yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Chubike. Thank you also to the panelists. I just listened to Dr. Ezekwesili and the painting a picture. And from what I posted there, I think the prognoses are quite dire. Looking at how do we come out of this? Because I know that some of the reforms are supposed to be constitutional. Mr. Chidoka talked about what the states can do. But we know that something even as little as getting electricity licensing, has to come from the federal government itself. So what we have now is that we have federal government seem like Agadabachiluzo in certain ways, So, and to reform these things has to be constitutional. But looking at the kind of legislators we have now, I was watching the debates on the electoral reform process, and you will almost shed tears. And these things are very, very clear that we need to transmit results electronically. But yet it was stood down, it was voted out, even when the yes had it, the nays still carried the day. So I'm asking, what is possible? In what way is it possible to sidestep the constitutional process, and go back to what we really would need to have, to have the states have more powers to
thank you very much.
What they need to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Your question is very clear. And let me start with Dr. Oby Ezekwesili to take on that question, and then to Chief Osita.
Well, I recently, I'm not recently anymore, because it was 2019. I took time out to to do some reflections on the nexus that exists between politics, quality of politics, a political institution, political incentives, and political systems, and the economic performance of countries. Intuitively, you would know that politics influences a lot of things, but it is even better for you to now empirically establish the strong correlation between the economic progress that countries make and their politics. And in that research, I found clearly that Africa's poor economic performance is the outcome of Africa's very dismal political system and culture, especially political culture. So we practice democracy, but we practice democracy in the breach. In my research, I come to the conclusion that what we practice is not democratic competition, because if we did practice democratic competition, it would resemble the kind of outcome you get when you look at competitive market as a type of market structure. In a competitive market structure, what you get is outcomes that are favorable to the consumers. And in the case of politics, if you looked at politics and governance as a service, just like any other service, say telephone service that we get, if we looked at it that way, you would find that in the case of our country and many of the countries in Africa, because it was an Africa-wide research, the outcomes are not favorable at all to the demand side, being the electorate, not at all. So the supply side of the service called politics and governance is basically entrenched. And because they are entrenched, they act as monopolists. So what we have on the continent is what my research calls monopolistic democracy. Monopolistic democracy is exactly as distorted as what you find in a monopolistic economic model. And so if you're going to do anything in a monopolistic market model, usually it is the regulator that steps in and corrects the distortion so that the supply side is not overwhelmingly dominating the outcomes and determining everything. However, in the political realm, you don't have the regulatory context being able to correct anything, because the regulatory context, whether it's the INEC or the judiciary or it's any other political institution.
Sorry to butt in, Doctor.
Yes.
Doctor, sorry to butt in. Someone is asking, is this research available anywhere that you it's a research that's turned into a course that I will be teaching, and until that is done, that's when the research becomes available. But you can see tidbits of it at the fixpolitics.org. So if you went to the fixpolitics.org website, you would find some tidbits of it. So this distortion is what has created the trap that the person who asked the question was asking. So what does the research then say? The research says that there's something known as that I came up with, a model that I constructed called the triangular pillars of democracy. If you're going to correct this trap, because the people in your political system, that is the supply side of your politics, have no incentive to change a thing that rewards them exceedingly and has no cost to them. Because they have no such incentive, it must be the demand side, that is the electorate, that must act. And that means that the electorate must act in collective action success model. All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Oby. We are running out of time, but let me come to you, Chief Osita Chidoka. You have a question around the young people, and then you have this question from Oby Nede, you making reference to the recent electoral reforms debate. So what's your reaction to this?
On the issue of young people, I would say that Nigerian democracy is maturing. So the OKPARA model is no more fully quite applicable. I happen to have led an organization that was a young organization called the Federal Road Safety Commission. So when I came in 2007, all my senior officers, when they joined in 1988, they were sector commanders. They were zonal commanders at level 8, at level 9. So they kept being promoted to those positions, such that by the time they became assistant corps marshals, they have been everything that the commission had. But those who joined now in 2007, it will take them 25 years before they make it to being a sector commander. So that's what happens in new organizations. So Nigeria, as a young nation with young graduates, of course, those young graduates are bound to take over governance and rule. But fresh graduates are coming. There's a backlog building up. So I saw it firsthand in road safety, how an organization, the pioneers, just like General Danjuma, General Basanjo, General Yaradua, they were all holding command positions from the day they joined the army. They were young officers holding command positions till when they became head of state. So that's why they don't know, they really don't know anything about being under. So they've continued to stay on top until they retired. So the second one is that even in those days of politicians, young politicians were more adventurous and bolder, because maybe you will say the politics was a little less corrupt, almost less corrupt than it is today. But let me give you an instance. When they were going to pass the University of Nigeria law to create the University of Nigeria, many people, S.G. Koku was the leader of opposition in the Eastern House of Assembly. So S.G. Koku said, which university are you building when education has fallen apart? He had this beautiful argument against the idea of University of Nigeria, saying that we should fix our local state and primary and secondary education. So the NCNC people planned that when they get to debate that, they are going to annoy him so that he will get annoyed and they will pass the bill without him. So the moment they went to speak, Honorable Ogon from Cross River stood up and said, well, some people here want to keep quarreling about the university just because their father sent them to university and they came back and rewarded their father with contesting the election against their father, because S.G. Koku contested against his father and defeated his father in Arochukwu constituency. So, of course, S.G. Koku stood up immediately and said, it's because you don't have a father that can send you to university. He was so angry. While he was shouting, the speaker put the question, those who support the University of Nigeria, say aye. The aye said aye, and they passed the law about University of Nigeria. The point was, they knew that S.G. Koku was a young man who contested against his father. So if any young man is waiting for anybody to come and make way for them for us to get on top, they're making a big mistake. There has to be a conscious contest for power. So my advice to that is that, we need to figure out how to do what I call periodic renewal of the organization by retiring certain people, by contesting against them. On the issue of the laws, I don't believe so much like people
in 1 minute, please.
Constitution is the problem. Our major problem is work avoidance and our inability to utilize the resources and the work we have today to achieve set objectives. Nobody is holding anybody accountable at the state level.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm taking away one phrase here, work avoidance. Work avoidance. I just made a just of it. All right. In case you just joined us, we've been talking about the merit-based leadership style of late Dr. M.I. Obara, former premier of the Old Eastern region. And you are on the platform of Center for Memories. I'm going to be, let me just remind you that just in about 10 minutes now, we have the documentary M.I. Power, The Legend and the Legacy, which looks at the life and times of late Dr. M.I. Obara, will be screening online. There's the link on the chat box here where you can also watch this documentary. So it's just after this conversation, you stay back. I'm rounding off now, and I want to go to the panelists in 1 minute each. We've discussed a lot. Actually, 1 hour is very short to talk about the person of late Dr. M.I. Obara. But how can we institutionalize the gains, the principles, the philosophies that we've discussed today, for the good of Nigeria, for the good of the region, and for the good of our governance generally? how do you think that these things can be made? Because looking at all the things that I've mentioned, it's interesting to note that some of the companies and most of the companies and things that MI Obara built, we cannot sustain them right now. We cannot even manage them, at the moment. So how can we institutionalize the gains and the principles of MI Obara moving forward to get Nigeria to where it should be? I will start with you, Mr. Tonye Cole.
Yes, thank you again, Chibuike. That's a really tough question, and but it's something that we cannot avoid, and it's something that we must do. Essentially, when we think about his legacy and we think about the things that he built, the mere fact that it's all broken down is not the lack of vision that he had, but the lack of the continuation of vision of those that came after him. The good thing about today is that people have started to question. The beautiful thing about seeing things break down before you is that you now have an answer to know that if you do not sustain certain things, this is where it's going to end. There's a whole generation that is now getting up who can sit down and see legacies like what MI Obara did, and then start from there to push it forward. And that's why I love what Center of Memories is doing. We're coming together to see that how do we take visions that were strong in the past and then move forward. A few weeks ago, I had to address one of the initiatives that Oby set up, which is SPPG. And I was asked to take a look at China and what makes China work versus Nigeria. One thing that became clear there was that you will not believe it. I think since the 1950s, China has stayed on developmental plans. I believe that they're on their 15th development plan or 16th. Every 5 years, just consistently staying on that development plan and moving and improving all the time. When we now looked at Nigeria, we started off with development plans. We had 4 development plans back to back. On the 5th one, we dropped it. We went to structural adjustment program. Then we dropped structural adjustment program, then had rolling plans. Then we dropped rolling plans after 2 rolling plans. And today, we've had 4 visions and strategies, Vision 2020, Vision 2010, So there's no consistency. So what we have to do is go back to consistency. Let us get back to what he was doing, which was a national development plan, and stay consistent to it all through. And that will make the difference.
Thank you very much. Go back to consistency and stay with it all through. Dr. Oby Ezekwesili, please, in 1 minute, how can we take the learnings from MI Obara to make Nigeria and the region better today?
Other countries are deliberate and intentional in the way they raise leaders. Our public sector, our public sphere is a place where all comers are welcome, and that's not right. So it's important that we should now begin to really train leaders for their emergence into public service. And so the SPPG that Tonye referred to, the School of Politics, Policy and Governance, we will certainly get hold of the documentary on Chief Dr. Michael Okpara, and we'll make it one of the resource materials for our students, because those kinds of ways of internalizing successful models of leadership will make a difference in the community of good practice of leadership that we are raising through that platform. The second part of it is that such documentation of the work of Dr. Michael Okpara is one that even existing leaders, how many of the existing leaders in the Southeast have you gone to screen this program for? It is important that you should engage them and screen this. Let them even learn something. Let them pick a particular, you can take a particular aspect of his work and build a project around it and say to them that you would like to partner with them. That public-private partnership can be a model for ensuring that we can actualize on his ideas. And finally, I believe that for Chief Michael Okpara's legacy to continue to work, even in the Southeast, for some of the aspects of primary education curriculum where they can make a difference. They can take in some of the aspects of his belief system and the basis for his emergence into a leader as part of the civic education for our children in that particular region of the country.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Doctor. And finally, Chief Osita Chijoka, please, in 1 minute, in 1 minute, please attempt this question in 1 minute.
Yeah, well,
we're out of time.
That I'm careful about over-romanticizing our past. I'm always very careful about it. What I still ask for is that our people should rise to the occasion. I keep talking about the bureaucracy and the colonial government that set the template on which our first republic worked. So they were kind of a control measure. The fact that we have outsourced probing, questioning, and keeping our leaders accountable, they are not going to change. They have no incentive to change. So if we want an MI Okpara today, we must create the incentive for an MI Okpara. We must go back to holding our leaders accountable. Now the question is, how do we do that? That can be the subject of another conversation. But the summary for me is that the crisis that came out of 1966, the Civil War, and all that has happened to us up till now should be lessons learned. And the critical part is that nobody should be trusted with our future. We shall build institutions to make sure. Just a final point, Cross River State Government set up an investment fund under Donald Duke, kept money 50 million naira every month. Go back to Cross River now and find out what has happened. That investment fund does not exist anymore. So
these are your people, Osita. So what are you talking about?
Exactly, I'm talking about
yourself. Take care of them on their behalf, since it worries you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So sorry, I have to end this here.
We could take that law, and they all did.
All right. Thank you very much. It's been an interesting conversation. Just before we go, I'm going to call on Nana Ude, who is one of the board members of the Center for Memories, to just in 1 minute close this conversation. However, let me point out that some people are complaining that the link on YouTube is showing private. Please, the technicals should work on it. Thank you. Nana, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chibuike. Let me just thank all our panelists. Antiobe, each time we listen to you, we don't want to stop. Thank you so much, Tonye, and thank you, Osita Chijoka Ikeobosi. And to all participants, those that joined via this webinar or the Facebook or via YouTube, we want to thank you so much for bringing out the time to listen to this webinar. And if there is one key takeaway for me from this, it's that when we look for leadership role models, you don't have to go as far as Singapore to look at Lee Kuan Yew or go to South Africa to look at Mandela. We have our own leadership role models right here in Nigeria, right here in Alibu, and one of such is MI Okpara. We thank you so much, and we click on the link to the YouTube page, and then we can then watch the documentary starting just about now. Thank you so much, everyone.
All right, thank you very much. The documentary is working now, it's public now, so you can click on the link and watch. Thank you, Dr. Oby Ezekwesili. It's been a pleasure having you. As always, I enjoy having you on my shows. Thank you, Chief Osita Chijoka. And thank you, Mr. Tonye Cole. I look forward to another conversation come next month on the Center for Memories. Thank you very much and goodbye. Let's go and watch the documentary. All right, thank you.
Bye.